questions.
Sure.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's interview with AI Dialogue. AI Dialogue is an international student-run organization which aims to promote discourse surrounding AI. We believe that it is important to understand the impact of AI on human communities, and AI Dialogue is publishing a monthly magazine featuring the latest developments in AI technology and interviews with experts in industry, academia, and government. We are thrilled to have you with us as we dive into the evolving landscape of AI. My name is Qixuan, and this is Felicity, and we will be your hosts. Joining us today is Mr. Tyler Sluys, author of EVA 2040, which is an action science fiction anthology series set in a near future dystopian world. Currently, his first volume of the series has been published, with more to come soon. And here's a quick synopsis of the series. In 2029, scientists achieved a breakthrough in human genetic engineering, creating the, quote, enlightened, a group that quickly became global elites. They corrupted governments and crashed economies to establish a new world order, ultimately placing humanity under the control of an AI named EVA by 2040. This transformation, called the conversion, resulted in a single unified global government. Now, privacy, legal rights, and freedom are relics of the past. In Volume 1, a former police officer turned security consultant discovers that his ex-wife has gone missing, with even EVA not being able to detect her. He suspects foul play among the government and goes rogue on an investigative journey to find and rescue her, while outwitting the detection of the ever-powerful and omniscient artificial intelligence. Mr. Sluys has worked many jobs among varying security details, including private investigation, and holds formal certification in security management. Such credentials include certification as an Associated Protection Professional from ASIS International, and certifications as a Certified Protection Officer and Certified in Security Supervision and Management from the International Foundation of Protection Officers. Aside from writing, his interests include martial arts, weightlifting, hiking, gaming, heavy metal music, and reading science fiction. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Sluys, and now I'll pass it on to Felicity.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Hi, Mr. Taylor and Shushan.
Hello. Can we get the volume up a little
Yeah,
bit?
I'm at max volume on my laptop right now.
My name is Felicity Musa from Kenya, and without much ado, we'd like to proceed to our questions, interview questions. What motivated you to write the EVA 2040 novel?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. I just had a story to tell. It's difficult for me to elaborate any further than that. I just some people are just naturally more creative than others. Where does creativity come from? I wish I could tell you, but different people are born with different attributes, different skills, different minds, and ever since I was very young, I've just always had the ability to create and come up with ideas. And I've always been motivated I've always enjoyed good storytelling, whether it's comic books, whether it's movies, especially in video games. As was mentioned in my introduction, I'm a pretty avid gamer. And, you know, I remember this was actually during the pandemic. I have pretty terrible insomnia, and that's where I get a lot of my ideas from. Unfortunately, not being able to sleep. And there was just one restless night laying in bed, and my mind was spinning, and that's where I came up with the underlying basis for the idea. But it was nothing more than just a cool thought that I had at that moment. And then just as my mind started to wander over time, I started coming up with more ideas. And then I came up with the thought, that would make a really good movie or book one day. But still never had the motivation to be the writer. I just thought it'd be a cool idea. More time passed, and then I was like, you know what? maybe I should write this book. I have a story that I want to tell, and I think it'd be interesting to pick up a new hobby. So that planted a seed within me that took a couple years to really manifest. And one day I had an analysis of my life and realized, you know what, it's now or never. I have the time right now, I have the motivation and the time lining up. So if I don't do it now, probably won't do it ever. Started doing it, tried to do a deep dive, learn as much as I could about the professional field of writing, and really it was quite the learning process. It really is a unique learning process, but went through it, and before I knew it, eventually it was finished, and now it's out for the world.
What do you think was like that original idea, or what was like the thoughts that were going through your mind on the first restless night?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's quite some years ago now. I don't remember it. Yeah.
I mean, I think like I think the story has like quite a few core components. That being like either being AI, that being security or mass surveillance, and also genetic engineering. So which one of these ideas do you think you came up with first?
I definitely came up with the concept of the security professional using the skill to try to outsmart an AI. And I think that drives more just from my professional background, being a security expert, and I've really enjoyed some of my favorite series are things like Neuromancer or Altered Carbon, right? And so the idea of someone who's just a total badass that can outsmart his enemies, and having a background working as a private investigator for 2 years, it's that idea of kind of like being on the hunt and having to outsmart the other people that are trying to uncover you, essentially, right? And so I think I have that bias in thinking coming from that background, and also the personal interest in it, which sparked that. And then I've always, AI as you know very well, is a hot topic in today's world, and still was a few years ago when I started to develop this idea. And so maybe it was just the combination of merging the two from there. And then as I started to come up with more ideas to give life and flavor to the setting of my dystopian world, the idea came from genetic engineering. And I have the idea of, when I ever get around to actually writing the second book, I have it all figured out. I have every chapter, I have roughly 2 paragraphs of summary, so I have it all planned and figured out. I'm more of a planner rather than someone who writes. We call it a pantser, someone who writes on the seam of their pants more. But for me, I'm more of a planner. I need to have it all planned out beforehand. And I just I reached out to somebody to get some information about, just to get the science accurate in the second book. I don't have a scientific background, and I think with sci-fi, a really important aspect is getting the details either accurate or theoretically plausible. Especially writing in a futuristic setting, it can be difficult to get something theoretically possible if you're writing very far into the future, because it's too distant to predict. But because mine takes place in the 2040s, I think we're at a state right now, being in the 2020s, that futurists and other people that are involved in the innovative academics, they can have at least a pretty good hypothetical analysis of where things might be going in that timeline with at least reasonable accuracy, right? And so so yeah, so I reached out and got some good information that hopefully will give life and accuracy to the second book. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think those are really good points of like having a scientific accuracy, and also as being kind of a novel that takes place in the 2040s, it kind of reflects the current technological trends as well. And I also really like the idea of combining the aspect of like security investigators outsmarting people, but instead of people, it's kind of like AI now. And I think that's a really cool and original idea that you came up with.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And that's actually one of the probably the largest compliment that I get from people who have read it and enjoyed it. Either that, or they like how how scary and how much it makes them think about the present day with technology, and how plausible that this dystopian future actually could become realistic one day. And that the book really is not all that much exaggerative of where things likely could end up. So, and I think that's one of the things that that people enjoy about it, and that I enjoy about it, is that it plays off of that that interest of, one of the things that people are fascinated with is fear and tragedy, right? The big three things are wealth, sex, and tragedy, as we call it. And I think that plays off of the tragedy end, is that there's this that grabs interest to it, as people we are drawn to catastrophe and scary things as long as it's not directly involving us immediately. Nobody wants to be caught in a house fire. Nobody wants to be held hostage at gunpoint. But when we can experience these things more vicariously, like through a movie or through even the experience of other people more distantly, like stopping and staring at a crime scene or a major accident where the ambulance and the firefighters show up and there's this big fire, everybody stops and we gasp in awe and wonder at this big scary thing that's happening. So there's a natural fascination that draws us to tragedy. And I think that the tragedy here is, I think everybody kind of knows, and I imagine we'll get into this more in greater detail at this interview with some of people's some fears and concerns with the development of certain technologies like AI. I think everybody kind of, we're all holding our breath. I think in some way or another we realize that the concern is there. How plausible or probable it is, that's really up for debate, but the possibility is certain. I don't think it's in question. And I think we're all kind of holding our breath to see where the future of the world ends up. And I think that my book kind of, the realism of it and the fact that there's really only minor aspects of exaggeration involved based on where I think things very plausibly could end up, that draws people to the dystopian setting of it, really. So
yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Felicity, do you have any other questions?
Sure. Mr. Sailor, I have a question on are there any memorable interaction or feedback from the developing countries on your AI journey in writing?
sorry, could you just repeat the question one more time?
Okay. My question is, are there any memorable interaction or feedback you can share where the developing countries have been able to congratulate you or air their views on your science fiction journey as a writer?
Not that I can think of. I think that the focus through my research and my thought process of creating this setting, not just for the book, but being a writer in general, has really kind of focused more on the opposite of more developed countries. But I think the only way I could really comment on this is I imagine that the development of these technologies, such as AI, can help globalize the world together in terms of, in terms of a lot of things. Like I know, I was reading something on the World Economic Forum's website, I think earlier this year, or it might have been last year, and they were talking about using not AI, but virtual reality and augmented reality technologies, where virtual classrooms, right? And a previous place where I had worked before had, there was a guy who actually worked on leading end of developing these technologies, and had a conversation with him about it. And yeah, we're developing virtual classrooms where the vision is that one day we can globalize different standards for education. So rather than I have a degree from this university in Canada, or I have a degree from this organization in some other country, and then having them not being recognized together, you can kind of standardize the whole world together under the same umbrella of education that way, because we don't have to rely on education being in a physical place at a physical time, right? So I think AI and other forms of technology is definitely going to help standardize things together and kind of help developing countries get more on the same level, and that is a positive aspect of the development of these technologies, because I don't think it's all scary and bad. There's a lot of really positive things that can come out of the development of AI and virtual augmented reality and things like this, for sure. I think the question is, it's a tool, just like all other things, like firearms. They're not inherently evil. It's a tool. It's explosives. Everything is a tool. It's just about how we use it, for good or bad, right? And so I kind of see this as just another development that could be the same way. And it'll probably be aspects of both. I don't think it's going to be all good or all bad, or it's probably going to be aspects of both involved. But I mean, I'm sure that's a deep rabbit hole that we could go down potentially, but I'll leave it up to you guys where you want to take that from here.
Yeah, maybe we can discuss this at a later time about like the societal impacts of AI. Just moving on to a different kind of question that's kind of related as well. In your novel, various jobs such as police officers and security consultants have become obsolete due to AI and surveillance technologies. So what careers do you think might be replaced in the near future, and why?
A lot of them. Let's talk about writing. This is a really hot topic in the field of writers, and basically not just writers but artists or anybody in like a creative space, right? And I see a lot of conversations happening in various platforms and forums, whether it be Reddit or Facebook, and it really does seem like a significant portion of people in the writing space are really skeptical about AI being able to take over and replace humans. And their essentially underlying argument, or the biggest argument, I think, comes from the understanding of human emotion and how important that is in quality writing, being able to capture somebody through humor or fear, like we previously talked about. These are all human things that a machine wouldn't necessarily be able to understand or replicate. And that really seems to be the biggest underlying argument for that. But I don't buy it. I think it's actually inevitable that it will happen. And I think that the only way that humans being successful as writers when AI reaches that level, I think could really only manifest if people specifically boycott anything done by AI out of some ethical principle, right? where, oh, this was done by a robot, I want something done by a human because go team humanity, right? The only people that I personally see doing that are writers themselves. I think the general public doesn't care. I think we just want good stories and we want to be entertained and moved and inspired. And if a machine is able to do that, I don't think the general population is going to care that much about it, because there's already a large aspect of anonymity involved with the entertainment platforms. I mean, there are examples of some really highly famous, successful writers that would share about their personal lives, and people who are big fans of the work might know a bit about that author, like J.K. Rowling would be a good example, George R.R. Martin. But I think for the vast bulk, think of a TV show you like, or a book you really like, or a sci-fi movie that you really like, or a video game that you really like. How much do most of us really know about the person behind the creation of it? Not very much. We don't really care. Like, we just like the story and we like being inspired. So I think that the general public, it's not the anonymity isn't something that really matters that much to us. And so why then would it matter if it's a human or a machine behind it at all? So really the only thing that I can see are writers supporting writers, because it's a dying industry and you have to stick together to survive. Outside of that, I don't see that. I don't think it's plausible. And I think the development of AI is likely to reach that stage sooner than we think. It's already done it with music. I mean, as mentioned before, like, I'm a big metalhead, right? I'm in that scene. And AI a couple of years ago created their own metal band with songs, not just the music itself. Like, the music I didn't find was that I wasn't that blown away by it. I wasn't impressed. The quality was so. It wasn't great, but it was decent. But what I was interested was in the character bios. Like, not only did it create a band and a whole gimmick and the songs for it, by the way, it was called Frostbite Orc Kings for anybody who's interested, but they created like a character bio for all of the digital band members and their personalities and background stories and stuff. And what was interesting about it is, like, the heavy metal world is a very underground and specific niche where it kind of has its own culture. And if you go even deeper than that, there's like its own, in a sense, kind of humor or comedy involved, almost in a way. Like, there's been certain shows to help influence that, like Metalocalypse, for example, was like an adult animated cartoon series that really capitalized on that a lot. And so, like, it managed to put humor, really funny content in the character bios, but the whole gimmick of it was right out of the niche that is the heavy metal culture. So it understood the culture of that underground style of music and was able to replicate something that, in my opinion, would have absolutely come from somebody who's fully immersed in that background. So that's what really impressed me. And so if it can do that with music and the creation of characters already now, imagine what that's going to be like 10 years from now. I mean, it's only going to, really, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think we're still in like the Atari phase, right? Where, if you went back, and when was Atari, like late 1970s?
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, just shortly after Pong, right? So, I mean, if you went back into 1978, for example, and showed them you showed them Elden Ring, right?
Yeah.
They would be absolutely stunned. Or if you try to describe the concept of it, like there would be a lot of skepticism held in 1978 about the development of how far video games have come since that time. It's hard to imagine something that big of a gap, but I think we're close to what would resemble an Atari stage with AI and its creation now. So I don't see how it couldn't eventually become like an equivalent leap in terms of its quality when it comes to writing. So long story short, yeah, I think writing is definitely one of those industries, art, things like that, and it's inevitable. It's only a matter of time, really. Yeah. But some people disagree with me. It's certainly a hot topic.
Yeah, I think the example you brought up with heavy metal is especially relevant because, like as you said, a lot of the arguments against why AI can't replicate humans in writing is because of the culture of kind of putting personality and also having themes that people can relate to. But as we've seen through the heavy metal, which was a few years ago, right? That like basically that notion is completely toppled by the fact that AI was able to replicate all of these factors of culture inside of it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I guess like all of the entertainment industry, all of writing, and all of the arts are at risk of being replaced by AI then.
I think so. Unless, for some reason, humans band together and boycott it.
Yeah.
And for the sake of humans supporting humans, for the sake of supporting humans. But like I said, I think realistically, the people in those spaces will be the ones who are motivated to do that. And I don't know if that support would be enough to keep it alive. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
What do you feel about technical fields then?
Yeah. Probably, but
I guess a better
Yeah.
question would be to like define what AI can't do and what jobs it can't replace.
right. That probably is a better starting point, actually. Well, I would hope that humans would always be in charge of the direction of AI. Putting AI in charge of AI just sounds like a recipe for Skynet. It's certainly concerning, right? Yeah, like I think humans have to be involved at the top. But then what do we do? Like, what does that say for the layperson, the average 9 to 5 office worker, like most of us are? And, it may be the case that I don't see this happening anytime soon, but if we look in the distant future, maybe AI gets to the point where we don't need to work most of our jobs and we actually live in I don't want to call it a utopia, but like humans are able to live for the sake of exploring the world and self-expression and being able to do what we want because we don't need to do the 9 to 5 since it's all taken care of by robots. So then this opens the door for an interesting discussion. Like what would the purpose of life be then? Like what would we do? Do we still need to go to school? Do we still need to, like, how do we raise somebody into society when society is no longer operated, at least largely in part by us, right? So because it's such a radically different take on what society could be, and it's a large unknown, then like, what do we do with the people? So I don't know. I would like to think that we can just grow up and kind of do what we want on our own terms. And if we want to travel, we travel. If we want to create, we create. And we can just have the time to be social and like just all like love each other and just have experience, and basically adulthood would be like kind of like when we're children, you know, we have all this free time to do what we want, play with our friends, see our friends, and not have to think and worry about too many things because it's all taken care of by our parents. And maybe it'll be like a similar thing where all that's being taken care of by the robotic system, right? It's a nice idea. I would certainly like to live that way, but I don't know. That's I'm not involved professionally in any space that directly works on that, so I can really only speculate from an outsider's perspective.
Well, I still think you brought up a great point, because even if we don't like go into a dystopian world like inside your novel, even if AI is able to replace all our jobs and we wouldn't have to work anymore, that still brings up a lot of philosophical questions about what exactly we're going to do with our lives.
Yeah. What it means to be human, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
that's an extremely difficult question to answer now, and then so the introduction of a robotic society is going to shake that up even more. So, yeah, it's a difficult thing, but you know, I think speculation on this really only does so much. Might be better to just wait and see what happens. Yeah.
All right, Felicity, do you have other questions?
Yeah. Mr. Taylor, in your novel, we have two monumental paradigm shifts for the world, which is the human genetic engineering and advanced AI. Are there any connection between the two, and how do you envision a similar dynamic to play out in real life?
So I think, like I mentioned before, there's some exaggeration in my book. I don't think there's really all that. I don't think there's too much, but this is one of the areas where I think the exaggeration comes into play. Like the idea for the genetic enlightened was really just all right. So there's two answers here. The first thing was I needed to come up with an explanation of how sort of the collapse of society as we know it could come about, and sort of the motivations for what brought that into this new dystopian world. So it was kind of like a background to answer that aspect of the book. But then there's also another reason for it, and that's to essentially accelerate mankind past our current social barriers that are holding us back from being able to fully utilize the development of technology and knowledge responsibly. I can't elaborate on that too much because it's a major spoiler of the book itself, but just to touch on a little bit, you know, there's one aspect in the book, there's a quote where closer to the end, there's this big philosophical debate happening between some of the protagonists and one of the, you could call him an antagonist, I suppose, where they eventually come to terms and they're kind of hashing it out on philosophical differences. And one of the quotes is, I might have to paraphrase it here, but I believe it's referring to us as Homo sapiens sapiens. We are primitive and carnal beings flirting with complicated and dangerous toys. And it's referencing to the fact that the development of technology and power and influence that humans can do with that technology over each other, or what that technology can do to us, is evolving at a speed exponentially faster than we are socially. Where I do think we are socially evolving for sure, but it's happening at such an incredibly slow rate that it's not equal. And so we are essentially monkeys with shoes that have access to nuclear weapons, and now we have AI. And I mean, just look at the way that social media even has impacted us in a lot of scary ways, right? And so that's a major cause for concern right there. I don't want to get too off topic though. So to basically summarize your question is that's sort of the motivation for the genetics there was first creating the period of conversion leading into the dystopian world for motivations I can't really disclose because they're spoilers, and then also the explanation for the philosophical ideas as well as what we are as people and the influence of technology.
Yeah, that answers a lot of our questions. Do you think it's kind of plausible in real life? I know we're going a bit off topic from AI, but do you think it's plausible in real life to have kind of this like genetic editing and also changing people to become more advanced than we are now?
Yeah, it's theoretically plausible, but theoretical. Like it's and this isn't my space, so I only know based on what I've researched or an interview that I've had with some experts on the topic where I am not as informed as I would like to be, but based on my current understanding, it does seem certainly theoretically possible. I do think that, again, the book has some exaggeration, but the underlying concept of it, for sure. And an interesting aspect is that AI could be a technology that can help with that. Even today we have AI systems that can do the calculations behind being able to predict how certain genes might be able to make certain expressions and stuff, right? And so I think when it comes to playing around with our genome, the development of AI could be one of those positive aspects that we talked about, one of those positive developments that can help sort of unlock the secrets of what we are. I think there is a lot of hidden information in our DNA that we have yet to discover. And it seems like what we originally considered to be junk DNA we're starting to uncover now and learn about is that it does actually have some functions. So the term junk DNA is a little misleading, right? I think that a lot of what we are, the answer would lie within that. And AI might be a tool that can help us unlock those secrets and then potentially manipulate them and play around with them a little bit more to maybe the next stage of evolution, right? I think it's certainly theoretically possible for sure.
Yeah, I think you also touched upon the fact that there was a bit of exaggeration in the book as well in terms of our technological progress.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly do you think is the likelihood that we do reach that level of technological progress in your book by 2040?
I think it's highly likely.
Maybe we can break this down
Yeah.
into like the AI part and also the biological part.
Well, I don't believe that there's going to necessarily be a new world order where that's run entirely by an AI. That's certainly the
Yeah.
exaggeration. But whether or not AI has influence on our lives and some of the micromanagement ways of the book where Eva does certain examples like that, I think for sure. Like, what would be an example here? Self-driving vehicles. I think AI. It's only a matter of time before AI is in our vehicles. I'm personally not aware of any current developments of that, other than being able to like self-drive and things like that. But I just think basically the answer I could give, I think, is what we've already touched on, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of this is really just theoretical. I'm just looking at. I'm waiting to see, as more progression happens in the next few years and stuff, once we start getting maybe in the late 2020s or 2030s, the 2040s are much closer, and we would be able to speculate with more accuracy probably at that point.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And so if we were to reach a level of like advanced AI or genetic engineering as in your book, how do you think that us humans will be able to utilize it? Do you think that it's going to be a good result or a bad result? And how likely do you think each scenario is?
I think it's going to be both. Probably going to make our lives more convenient, but is the conveniency a net positive overall? And that, I don't know. I think in some ways it will be, but my biggest concern here out of everything is the control, because you have to look at who is designing the AI, what are their motivations, where does the funding come from, what is its ultimate purpose. There's been a lot of scary things talked about in the last couple of years by some of the leading organizations, particularly the World Economic Forum. And a lot of things that they've openly talked about has opened the door for a lot of conspiracy theories, which I can't confirm or deny, but I certainly understand where the conspiracy is coming from. Like they've talked about a lot of really scary things, that developments of merging man with technology, the fourth industrial revolution, of basically a transhumanist agenda almost, right? And it's just like talking about brain chips and being able to read people's emotions, and it's just like, well, what's the underlying what's the force behind that? Like, what is the underlying spirit that's for the motivation for wanting humanity to be that way? And I don't know if it's a benevolent one. I think, and this is just my speculation, but I don't think all rich people and all people who are among the world elites are bad and evil, but I would suspect that a large portion of them could be. I think there's a sociopathic tendency that drives people to want to be at the top. And I actually had this conversation just a couple days ago, coincidentally. We talked about, not that long ago in the distant past, even just a couple hundred years, you had conquerors, you had people committing genocide on nations, going on horseback with axes, cutting people's heads off, Vikings and things like that. And it's like, again, let's bring this back to the development of how slow we've evolved socially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like technology has improved a lot, but socially we're not all that different, even from a couple hundred years ago. So those conquerors, that character trait, where did it go? I mean, in modern day society, you can't go around on horseback cutting people's heads off. You can't. So how does that manifest in the modern day? And I think one of the ways it can likely do that is through conquering through business. It's never enough, needing more and more and more. And instead of going across the nations and slaughtering people, that selfish fulfillment comes through, I think, through business, becoming wealthier, owning more and more and more, and being able to control people more and more and more. I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination that the reason why people are built the way that they are to become the 0.1% of the world's elites is a sociopathic nature. So, and again, that doesn't apply to all of them. So I am generally largely concerned with, this is my largest concern with the development of AI and things like that. It's going to make our lives better in a lot of ways, and it certainly opens the door to the development of certain technologies that can completely innovate the world of medicine or engineering. But for the layperson, it's like the people that are in control of a major AI like this that can influence and propagandize us into thinking or feeling certain ways, having brain chips where people would just be able to collect the data of our thoughts. Where, like, what happens to our privacy, and how are people going to manipulate that data? We see the shrinking today of the middle class, and the gap of wealth between the most elite and us in the lower and mid class is shrinking more and more and more. So I see a trend here that AI could be further utilized to take advantage of that, and having control over the people as being the grunts that run the world for them and their enjoyment, right? And I could be totally wrong here, but just from observations that I've made of some leading organizations, some statements that they've made about their envisionment of technology and how that will affect the average person in the near future, it's some concerning stuff. We can only speculate behind the motivations behind that, but I don't know how hopeful that I am that would be anything other than people trying to control and become more influential over the layperson than they are now. So I'm sure there's a lot there that we could expand on. I don't want to ramble too much. I guess where would you like to drill into that from here?
No, I mean, like, wow, that is a very concerning idea, and it's something that I haven't actually heard about before. And so I just wanted to, I guess, keep on the rambling. I wanted to ask some details. So you said that like a lot of these ideas were proposed by the Open Economic Forum. What? And so I'm not like too familiar on that organization. So is it kind of like a leading organization that advocates for economic policies?
Yeah, exactly. They formed quite some time ago, and basically the purpose of it was to discuss a lot of the world's economic situations and things like that. And one of the primary motivations of their leader, Klaus Schwab, is he sees a lot of problems in the way the world's financial development, especially concerning around the concept of GDP just being inherently flawed as it is. He's written a couple of books about it, made it public, and he even has this concept called the Great Reset, which is sort of an underlying idea where I kind of got the concept for the conversion in my book from, actually stems from this, where he talks about the Great Reset being this: we need to reset the world, the way we think about the world's economy, right? And he's basically kind of proposing a new envisionment of the world, right? And when you read the books at face value, it seems like he does bring up some interesting points, and there are certainly a lot of flaws that we can't really envision how to escape without a hard reset on the way that the world's economy is run. So there's definitely some interesting points there. But it seems like in the last handful of years, or since I've started paying attention to them, they've grown a lot to the point where they have a lot of partnerships with some of the leading organizations around the world, Facebook, Google, a lot of investment companies like Vanguard and BlackRock. So a lot of, not all, but a large chunk of what we could consider to be like the world's elites, those who own and are in control of like almost anything, right? Are partnered essentially to this like idea and what they stand for. And in the last couple of years, so every January they meet in a town called Davos in Switzerland, right? And so they have, everybody flies in and they have these discussions on the world stage, and it's all on video. You can find on YouTube, you can find all of their like discussions and stuff, and they talk about some really interesting things. They talk about where they think technology is going to go in the future, and there's some good stuff. Like one of the things that we already touched on it a bit was how we can use like virtual classrooms to like standardize the world globally with a lot of things, which I think is a really good idea. So they talk about some really interesting stuff, but then there's also some other things where they talk about how the use of technology and how it can influence the average person, and some of it is really concerning, and it makes me think about, well, like, what's the motivation behind that? What's the motivation for wanting to have a brain in everybody, or have a chip in everyone's brain where you will be able to detect someone's emotional reaction to something that you say? I mean, this is getting into like it's a direct attack on freedom of thought, freedom of belief, and privacy. Like, so my own thoughts and not even my thoughts, but my instinctual emotional reactions that I don't really have control over. Somebody says something, it could be a political idea I don't agree with, and internally I have this instinctual emotional reaction that's negative. And then now the people who, like my boss at a workplace, would be able to know that. And now my boss knows that I'm not in line with their vision. Like, what's going to happen to me? Right? So, like, it's a really scary thought, not just because of the lack of privacy, but people being able to do that to influence other people. Yeah, I could go on and on and on. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. A lot of this is just conjecture. But since we're on the topic of what are some of the scary things that can stem from that, and I think having open discussions about and then not just a hypothetical an idea, but an envisionment. This is an envisionment of the near future. For human beings, it's I think we're playing with some dangerous stuff there, and the average person like you and me, you know, what ability are we going to have to say no? I mean, with the amount of power and influence the people in the world elites have over us now, it's certainly a scary thought, and there is exaggeration in my book, of course, but a lot of the exaggeration plays off of concepts that I'm seeing in the modern day of the world around us now, looking at things like that, looking at other things that we've talked about that are currently happening in the world around us. I mean, it's not that all that exaggerative after all, because the underlying concepts for these things are stemming from real things that I'm seeing around us that are happening right now. So I am concerned, but I don't think I think there will be a mix of good and bad. I think that convenience is how you get people to comply, is through convenience. And in order for them to have people to be open to the idea of getting a brain chip, because they can't just come pin you down and put it in your head. You have to, right? So the idea to get people to be open to accepting these new technologies, and eventually it becoming something that you must have, like a cell phone, I think it's going to come through convenience, making it convenient, and the more convenient something is, the more we're going to want it, right? Which means that it's going to have benefit for us as well. It's not just going to be this evil thing like the mark of the beast, like so a lot of conspiracy theorists want to jump to. It's going to be accepted by people because it will be something that we will want, because it's going to make things better and easier and more convenient, which means by definition it's going to also be a good thing. So I don't think it can be like this all good or all bad thing. I think even if it is used for like malevolent intention, the driving force behind how people begin to utilize it is going to be because there's another side to the coin, which is that we're going to be open to it because it's also going to make things better and easier for us as well. So I think it's going to be both. But if there is a net positive or a net negative overall, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's really hard to say because it's hard to predict basically anything in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Felicity, do you have any questions?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Taylor, with the AI advancement in the developed countries, we have data governance as seems to be the foundation of many national AI policies, according to the European AI Act. And now in Africa continent, we have the challenge on data protection. How do you envision AI in Africa in future scenarios? Are they optimistic or pessimistic, or they are both?
Hmm. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of what Mr. Su said earlier, that there are going to be benefits, but there are also going to be drawbacks and complete societal shifts.
I can agree with that. And I think that, if we're trying to specifically analyze how AI could benefit one nation over the other, I think is really a short-term question because, like I said, AI is going to help globalize the world, right? And then so how does it impact Africa any more than Canada after this globalization has taken place? It's going to be probably close to the same, right? So, yeah, that's what I think anyway.
All right, moving on
That's
to some.
great.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've said that sounds great, and I think what Mr. Taylor said it's more on developing AI in Africa, and now that Africa there is a fear of being digital colonized by the developed countries. I think we have to create more programs to educate them on the AI advantages and also its disadvantages. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I don't have really much more to comment on that.
All right, moving on to another question that's a bit more recent, I guess. Would you consider it to be the most significant breakthroughs or advancements in AI so far?
I think that's going to really depend on who you ask because everybody is looking through a biased lens of how AI is impacting their own personal life or their profession. For me, coming from a security background, I've seen in the last handful of years AI being merged with camera systems and security systems, and you can do it in some really interesting ways. Where you can kind of have a system actually follow somebody without the manual control of like a human being behind it. You can do things like recording data, facial recognition is really high. So coming biometrics, identifying people, solving crime, preventing crime, or even just like data collection. Like you can do things like you can have a camera set to, okay, how many people with yellow t-shirts have entered this space, this public space, from this period to this period. And it will tell you like, hey, 4 people with yellow shirts in the last 5 days came through here. So I think it's gonna really help us for sure in the field of surveillance. And I think that it has already surpassed humans when it comes to active surveillance over an area, and that frees up the manpower actually to have more people involved in the actual physical spaces themselves to crowd control or to deal with people more on a face-to-face physical basis, right? So I think that a lot of the systems are going to largely make human interaction irrelevant when it comes to like security teams at a particular business or something like that. That's already happening. It's definitely going to make catching people a lot easier. And I think the police will start being able to utilize these technologies for biometrics a lot more easily. So that's kind of where my immediate thought goes. And then regarding some of my other hobbies, like writing, for example, I think we already touched on that. Like it's in my opinion, it's going to largely eliminate it, if not fully, or eliminate human involvement in it rather.
And I think just touching back on one of the points we talked about before, it's kind of difficult to find what exactly AI can't do. And so it goes to this concept of like artificial general intelligence, where an AI is more capable than an average human in essentially every field.
Yeah.
And so do you believe that this is going to be a reality one day? And if you do, then when do you think this is going to happen?
I think that probably will be a reality, and it'll happen pretty quickly. I think like 1 to 2 generations, or not decades, probably 1 to 2 decades. I don't really have any of my own unique input to put on that matter. This influence is really coming more from just reading that I've done on the topic about what some futurists are anticipating. But I don't see any reason why I disagree with them. So, based on my understanding, I think it's highly likely. Personally, I can't envision any argument against that as to why it wouldn't. The way technology's been progressing, like I said, I think we're in the Atari stage, and it's gonna just go way past what we can fathom at some point, unless we pump the brakes on it somehow. But if things keep progressing the way that they will, it's just going to become more and more impressive. And computers can already outthink humans. That's been around for a long time. So, yeah, as to when, based on my reading, probably I think 1 to 2 decades, likely.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this AGI coming in the next 1 to 2 decades is mostly like this sentiment is mostly repeated in communities related to like AI safety and also some of the leading tech companies. Whereas I guess some other people, particularly like scientists, they believe that actually AGI might come like much later, maybe towards the next century or many decades afterwards. And so I think it's really interesting to hear all of the perspectives that people have on when they believe AGI will arrive.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that technology keeps outdoing our expectations. We set expectations when we think it will happen, even being generous, and then it's usually even before that sometimes. So, yeah, who knows? But it's certainly a hard thing to predict.
Yeah, I mean, another perspective is we can take nuclear fusion. We said that nuclear fusion was going to be happening in the next 30 years, but now we say that nuclear fusion will happen in the next 30 years again. And it might just continue like this. So honestly, nobody really knows when AGI will come or if it's even possible. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the future entails for us.
Yeah, and a big factor of that's going to be the political motivations behind it too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
And what do you think are the greatest advancements to come from AI in the coming decades?
Certainly medical. I mean, I think if we can hook up a machine to a full database of all access to all available medical information, every published study in every journal ever statistically, it could make a more of a quantitative assessment on the right approach on how to deal with a certain pathology.
Mhm.
I don't know how well it could do in a qualitative sense, but with AGI, it might be able to. But with more of a narrow focus on how computers currently calculate things, certainly in a quantitative assessment way, like a doctor only knows what's in the doctor's own knowledge, right?
Mhm.
And there's so much information that's put out there in so many different databases and medical journals that not everybody could ever learn all of it. And or if they do update their knowledge, it takes time, right? Whereas when something is published immediately, shared across all networks, you have something plugged into that system that can just look at all the data and just make an objective statistical analysis on all of it. It can make recommendations of this is how we're going to treat this disease in this particular patient based on the specific case, right?
Mhm.
So I think doctors will be able to utilize technology like that in their decision-making process on what to do, how to approach a particular case, for sure.
Do you think AI will replace doctors?
We would have to.
Because like currently there's AI that has like pretty close capabilities to what a doctor actually can do. Because like doctors
Yeah.
prescribe, they diagnose, and so can AI do that, but to a more limited degree, I guess.
Well, if an AI can make best judgment call approaches based on statistics, I'm sure it would be able to recommend a specific treatment like prescriptions or things like that.
Yeah.
The question is, I think for me, it's there are more aspects to being a medical professional than the logic and analytics. Like the bedside manner, the ability to make decisions based on the sensitivity of the humanity behind things, right? And then this kind of goes back to what we've already touched on as AI being able to eventually recognize that one day. I think that would be a key factor to consider is will the machine be able to handle those aspects of how you approach taking care of somebody, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see any reason why I couldn't. It's just like how I argued before with what it's already done, understanding humor and culture and emotions with writing music and other things too. Why couldn't it eventually take over that aspect as well? So likely, but we would also need the physical hardware as well as the robots to be the surgeons. Like we would need the AI to also operate the physical machinery to be in the room to do the surgical precision and all of that as well.
For sure.
And but why couldn't? I mean, we've already seen like there's people that doctors are using like robotic hands so they can make really fine incisions and stuff and do these like crazy surgeries. So again, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, like maybe there actually could be like a cyborg, or I guess that'd be an android. Yeah, an android, because it's fully robotic, operated by the AI to go in and do a heart transplant or something like that. So certainly not outside the realm of plausibility, I would say. Yeah.
Let's say that in this scenario we do develop such an android. So now you have two choices: either to, I guess, get a heart transplant from your doctor or to get it from the android. Which one do you choose?
I would want to read about the statistical success rates of the android technology first. If it's in its beta stages and stuff, I wouldn't want to be the guinea pig for testing out that technology, that's for sure. But if it's been around for a long time and we start to recognize that this is actually a higher success rate, I'm gonna go with a robot. I want to live. Like I am a person who my life has been saved through medical surgery, and so for me, having experience going through that process, I just want to wake up cured. So if that means that I have to trust an android to do it, and I have a higher chance of making it through the operation that way, that's my ultimate goal, right? So as a patient, yeah, for sure. If the reliability is there, I want the machine.
Does this mindset of just comparing the statistics and the reliability also transfer to other AI that directly affect your life? Like, for example, self-driving cars?
I would say no, just because I like driving. It's fun. Not always. I mean, there's rush hour and
Yeah.
but generally the roads are open. I like driving. It's fun. I don't want a machine to do that for me. And I think that philosophy would carry over to other aspects of my life too. Like, there's things where I might want a robot to do it for me. Like, go ahead and fold my laundry. Go ahead and clean my dishes. Do the chores. But there's other things that I like doing because it's fun and I like experiencing them. And I certainly still want to have my own autonomy. I don't want to just be like a brain in a tank where I don't have any autonomy anymore, and I'm just experiencing consciously what technology is doing for me in my life. Like, obviously that's an extreme exaggeration, but like, I think it would depend. There's things where I like being in control, and then there's other things where I don't really want to deal with them, and it'd be much better for a robot to take care of everything for me, like folding my laundry. So
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the scenario and everybody's personal preferences.
for sure.
Yeah, and I have a question about AI alignment and some of the risks that AI pose. So you talked about a lot of the risks that nefarious actors can pose with AI or a misuse of AI. But what happens if the AI is not aligned with its intended goals? Are you worried about that scenario?
If the
I can
is
do a
not
clarification.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, what I'm saying is that a misaligned AI system is an AI system that is not following the intended goal. So, for example, like if I wanted to make I guess we'll just take a famous example. It's the paperclip maximizer. So if I wanted to take an AI and I wanted it to create paperclips for my company, it will do that, and it'll get to a point where it optimizes it so much that it like mines all the iron out of earth, and then it starts like killing people to get the iron out of their bodies to make paperclips. And so even though it's like that was kind of what the AI was intended to do, that doesn't really align with human values, and that doesn't align with what the creators actually want the AI to do.
Yeah. So we would have to have a kill switch, right? So like, yeah, I think there's probably ways that we can test how literally a computer is going to follow its programming. There's probably smaller ways to like test that along the way before we give it this huge responsibility where it's now going to start getting iron out of people's bodies and killing them, right? So we might be able to we might be able to anticipate what a machine would do if it actually had the capability to go around and do that by giving smaller AIs smaller tasks with smaller capability, and then sort of like evolve the testing methods from there to make a prediction as to like, well, what would this do now that with these commands? So I don't know if it's this thing where it's just like this big unknown, and then we flip a switch on with this big AI that now goes around like a Skynet thing, right? Like in Terminator, where they just press a button and now these robots are now just start killing people. Like, I think there's testing methods we can give systems along the way that would give us indicators on how we can make more intelligent decisions on what we should allocate AI to do. So I'm not too worried about that. But I guess to answer more directly, if something like that could happen, I would want there to be systems in place where kill switches to shut it down or to limit its capabilities, or hey, if Skynet ever does happen, like EMPs. I think it's important to have communities that trust each other and people have survival skills, knowing how to hunt and fish and grow food and build things. And then if you can be connected with a group like that and have an EMP, you destroy everything, but at least you can still survive, right? So I don't know. Sounds like I'm not worried. I don't think that there's going to be like this AI revolt against humanity where, like in Terminator, where they're killing everybody. Like if AI damages humanity, it's going to be through how it impacts us and the way that we live. It's going to happen more influentially rather than metal boots on the ground with guns flat out killing people.
And I don't think that if AI was to destroy humanity, it would be out of like a malicious intent just to destroy humanity. I would think that it's because for the AI, destroying humanity is an intermediate step in order to maximize their own goals.
Yeah, not right. Or not in an immoral sense, but an amoral sense, just being removed from all concepts of ethics and morality altogether. So it's not like it hates or is evil, but it's just doing what it does and doesn't understand the ethical impact that or the humanism behind it, right? Because it's not a living thing. So yeah, no, I agree with you there.
And some of, I guess, the things that make kind of misalignment concerning is that, first off, the AI architecture is kind of a black box. So we don't really exactly understand anything that the current like AI models are doing. And also, as you said before, like the capabilities of AI are also accelerating very quickly, and we might see AGI in 10 or 20 years. So like, in terms of capabilities, I feel like AI like would not only be more intelligent than humans, but they're also going to have like multimodal capabilities. And lastly, even though like we probably can find answers to all of these questions, the main problem is, are we fast enough to the race? Like, is the development of AI going to outstrip the speed of like AI safety and fields like that?
Yeah.
And so does that change your mind at all about like the possibilities of risks for AI misalignment, or do you think like nefarious uses of AI are still the major issue?
That's a very good question. I think nefarious uses of AI are probably still the largest issue, but regarding AI misalignment, yeah, I think that one thing that could certainly help might be a regulatory body, because like internationally, because and I could be wrong, but I think my current understanding is we have a lot of different nations are kind of developing AI their own way. So if the US, Russia, China, whoever develops a super AI that does go out of alignment, then it's like that nation or that company rather, that they're limited to themselves to try to get it under control. Whereas if we had a large regulatory body where everyone kind of put their resources in as sort of something to oversee this happening in a like a responsible way, in an ethical way, there would be more, I guess, for lack of better terms, allies or organizations in place that can work together as a greater force to come up with a solution on how to deal with it. So, like if Google comes up with some super AI that goes Skynet or something like that, then it's like, how does organizations outside of Google, what can they do about it? Because there's we have all these laws and all these formal ways of going about things, right? So yeah, maybe a regulatory body is a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, it's a complex issue. This is why we don't have an answer to it yet. But yeah, well, there's a lot of possibilities to tackle this problem.
And I think a key component in that is having discussion. Like, so I think what you guys are doing here with this and putting a spotlight on these issues is a key component. And like, hats off to you for doing that. Like, you're in high school?
Yes.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was lifting weights, playing video games, and listening to heavy metal. I wasn't doing anything like as profound as this. And I became more in philosophical and existential matters later on. But when I was your age, I wasn't doing anything like this. So kudos to you. But this is an important factor. Like, I think we need a frustration that I have is most people don't seem to care about discussing these types of matters. They just want to go on with, I just want to live my life. I want to do my thing. I want to drink my smoothie. I want to eat my wrap. I want to go to my job. I want to play with my dog. I want to, like, it's very existentialistic. It's very down to earth, the here and the now, things that are concern my immediate existence and vicinity, right? And I think that that's a dangerous thing because things are developing outside of our radar. And I think having a larger population of people become more interested in these matters, giving them some serious thought and consideration, and being able to discuss these ideas is a key component towards not just advancing and accelerating technologies, but the safety pins for them too, right?
Yeah.
So like the biggest step to uncovering answers is seeking the answers and talking about the problems, and more people need to do that. So yeah,
for
congrats
sure.
to you.
And that's yeah, and that's exactly why we have this organization running these interviews. It's so that we can hear all of the perspectives, we can think about all of the different solutions that we can have for the multitude of issues that we might bump along the way in AI.
Yeah.
All right, Felicity, do you have any questions or anything else to add?
Yeah, do you consider alignment as an important aspect to focus on during the development of the AI models?
Probably. We would, if I'm understanding your question correctly, with alignment, like, I mean, we certainly want the machines to do for what our intended purpose of them is, right?
Yeah.
Because if it is able to become sentient or as close to sentience and becoming a free agent, being able to influence itself and go its own path outside of not just our wishes, but our ability to detect and control, then that opens up the whole fear that we had just discussed about a Skynet happening one day, right? Or an AI revolt. So I think that having alignment with really any technology that we make is probably a good thing.
And lastly, I just wanted to ask you about what do you think are some of the solutions or actions we can take to reduce risk from nefarious uses of AI?
First and foremost, awareness. People have to know and talk about these things. Mainstream media doesn't report about this. We need to discuss these ideas, and a lot of things are happening. I don't even think that needs elaboration. It's just we need awareness, and we need people talking about it for the reasons that we had just discussed about AI. And they're not considered or very well known, and so I think bringing them up and just talking about them in our social circles is the first step towards a major accomplishment, for sure.
And I guess it's just like many of the issues that we've faced before and are currently facing, like a nuclear war, climate change. If we don't talk about these things, then nothing's going to change.
Yeah, we have to be open and talk about these types of stuff, and take a moment out of our busy days not to think about ourselves and to think about the impact of the things we are doing as humanity, how that can impact all of us in the future, for sure.
I think that's a very powerful message to end off here.
Yeah.
It was an
I
honor
agree.
to meet you,
Yes,
Mr. Sluys.
yes, thank you for having me.
And it was a privilege to have this fruitful discussion.
For sure.
Once again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Sure, thank you.